Well, hello. Welcome to God Talk. If you missed the first one, this is our second program. I'm Dan Smith. I am and have been the pastor at Garden Grove down in Orange County here in California. I'm in the process of transferring to retirement, and I will be then working here part-time at LBN, and down the road at Quiet Hour. I will be speaking at evangelism around the world. So it's a little bit of a change in my life. I've done a couple different programs here with LLBN. It's been my honor for, 20 years almost. So we did a program called Flame of Truth, and then we've been doing God's Prophetic Surprise, GPS, with John Pauline and other pastors. But as I sort of resigned and retired from all of that, they said, why don't you do something on your own, and you can come when you can come. And so can I do a series on God? So you can know that that's what we're going to do. You get to God Talk, we're going to talk about the issues around the character and the picture of God. That's my theme in life. I can pastor and preach on anything, but that's my go-to area. And if that's kind of what you're looking for in your life, I hope you'll find this show. If you missed the first one, maybe you can find an archive online somewhere. Called Go On In, the story of Esther. Today, take a look at the old story of the Prodigal Son. There is I suppose you call that a joke. It's been around a long time about the man walking on the beach, and he opened up a bottle, and out popped a genie, and the genie said, thank you for saving my life. I'll give you one wish. Oh, he said, I'd like to go to Hawaii. Never had a chance to go. I'm scared to fly. I get seasick on ships. Build me a freeway all the way to Hawaii, and I can go to Hawaii. And the genie says, that really is not too much. Think of the cement it would take to go 2,500 miles and down to the bottom of the ocean. Think of something else. The guy says, okay, help me understand women. I've never been able to understand women. They laugh when they should cry. They cry when they should laugh. That make no sense. Help me understand women. Genie thinks for a minute and says, would you like your freeway 2 lanes or 4 lanes? Meaning you can't understand. We don't have to understand each other. That's not the point. But God says, I want you to understand me and know me. Philip Yancey writes another version of this Prodigal Son story. So let's just kind of take that. He says you're over in let's say the Philippines or somewhere, and there's a girl that's fighting with her father or mother. They don't like her hair, they don't like her music, they don't like her friend, they don't like her clothes, they don't like anything. They're fighting all the time. Finally, 16 years old, she runs away, steals some money, jumps on a bus, goes down to, let's say, Manila. You can substitute any big city. She gets off the bus and she begins to walk. She's pretty, she's cute. Someone in a big black car comes up next to her and said, hey, you hungry? Well, she was. Takes her out to dinner. Next thing you know, he's giving her some pills that make her feel fantastic. And she's in a big hotel and she's a teenage prostitute. For a while, she's doing great. She has fun, she has money, she has drinking and drugs, and she's in a beautiful hotel. And she's doing good. Gradually, things begin to go down, and then she gets a disease. Now no one wants her anymore. So they put her out of the hotel. There's no more party. There's no more drug. There's no more drinking. There's no friends. She's on the street sick. And she thinks, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe home is better than this. Calls up her dad and leaves a message on the phone and says, I think I made a mistake. I'm going to come home on a bus. It's going to come in at midnight to our village. If you're there, let me come home. I'll get off. If you're not there, I'll understand. I'll just keep on going on the bus. So she gets on the bus, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Will anyone be there? Will they forgive her for leaving? Will they take her back? Finally, 11 o'clock, she tries to put herself together the best she can. Finally, 12 o'clock, the bus pulls into the terminal. She waits for everyone else to get off first. Finally, she has to face it, comes out the door. Here they all are. So here they come with little funny hats, and they're all, there's a banner, welcome home. They come running, her father, mother, siblings, her grandparents, everybody is there, 30, 40 people, all hugging her. She sees her dad, and she begins to say, Dad, I'm so, honey, never mind, never mind. We're just glad you're home. Enough. The Bible, we often call it the story of the prodigal son. I think if Jesus had 5 minutes to tell you what God is like, his Father is like, he would tell this story. It really tells us everything you need to know about what God is really like. Satan's been telling lies about God for thousands of years, and Jesus wants to clear that out. So he tells this story. I think first of all we would hear that God is incredible. He is a rich father. Some people are afraid. You read the story of Daniel 1. Daniel and his friend don't want to eat the king's food, so they go to the king's servant and they say, let us eat our food, and your guys eat their food, and let's see which group is better. And the servant says, but what if you're worse? That's always what people are afraid of, is if they get too close to God, if you get religious, life will get worse. The party will be over. No more drinking, no more parties, no more sex before marriage. You have to give your money to the church. You have to take a day and go to church every week. You have to live by certain rules. You'll get worse. The prodigal son story says, no, you have a father who's rich, has an inheritance. Why does anyone leave the father's house? Magic Johnson said, one time, grew up with an Adventist Christian background. He said, God knew what he was doing when he gave me HIV, because he knew I had the personality to handle it. Where do we get this picture of God? Whenever there's a disaster, people say, oh, God sent that. These are acts of God. Someone dies, someone says, God took them. Where do we get this picture of God? And no, God is not like that. He is a father, and he's rich, and he has heaven, and he has everything. He is the best. I was in India. We're going to go again, I think, this next January. School down south called Newsfed. We have a little hospital there. And the hospital has been helping farmers and people who have tried to commit suicide. They were losing all their money. They drink fertilizer. And they try to lead them to Jesus. And he said, you want to meet one? I said, I'd like to meet one. We drove out into the countryside to a little village, little small church, and then we went to the house. Here he was, the family. Here was a man in his late 40s maybe, and then his father. And they told the story. He was the chief. The father was the grandfather was the chief. And so they had some of the Hindu gods in their backyard. And the Christian doctor, my Adventist friend there, had said to them, how's it working for you? Well, not very good. He said, you need Jesus. Jesus has more power than those gods. Okay, we'll get rid of him. He said, no, let's wait. Pray for 7 weeks. We'll pray and you pray. If after 7 weeks. So the 7 weeks had just been the week before I got there. And after the 7 weeks, they decided to destroy those gods. And the man himself took the sledgehammer and he smashed those gods. I saw the place. I have a picture with me and the family. And that night, the whole family was on the front row of my meeting, 2,500 people, singing songs to Jesus. Because he found that God and Jesus were better than what he had before. They had more power. There's a wonderful story about the parable, I think, about the art collector and his son. They loved collecting art. They didn't do it for an art museum. They did it for their own house. They had wonderful millions of dollars of art in their house. And the two of them loved going around the world looking and to buy the great art. Well, they got a notice. They had to go to Vietnam in the war. So for that while, no more collecting art. After about a year in Vietnam, a soldier knocked on the door, and the old man opened the door, and here was a soldier, and he said, "I'm so sorry, but your son was killed in battle. He was trying to save someone's life, but he's gone. We're so sorry." The old man knew he would never collect art with his father again. Christmas Day, there was another knock on the door. The man came to the door, he was also a young soldier, and he said, "Could I come in?" He said, "I knew your son. In fact, I was the one who your son was saving when he got killed. I owe my life to your son." We had so many talks. He always was talking about how he and his father collected art, how much he loved art, doing it together with you. He said, "I'm an artist a little bit too, so I painted you a little picture of the sun." So he opened it up. It was not great art, but it was the sun. So he said he put it up on the mantle over the fireplace. A few weeks later, the old man died. The word went all over the art world that now all this art was going to be available. It was going to be sold at auction. They came from all over the world to buy. When they got there, there's all this art. They're walking around looking catalog. Came to sit down, and the auctioneer started the sale, and he put up a picture of the sun. He said, "First, we're going to sell this one." He said, "No, that's ridiculous. That's trash. Come on, throw that away." He said, "No, we're going to sell this one first. Who will give me $100 for this sun?" Silence. Finally, one man in the back said, I knew the boy. I'll give you $10 for that." So finally, anyone else go up? No. Finally hit the go. 1, 2, 3, sold to the man in the back for $10. He came and got the painting. Then the auctioneer, everyone cheered. Okay, now we can buy this great art. Then the auctioneer says, "No, the auction is closed." "What do you mean closed? There's millions of dollars of art here." No, it was in the Father's will that whoever bought the picture of the Son got it all. That's what we believe about God. The Bible says he who has the Son has life, gets it all. Our God has everything. And he's a Father. Why does anyone ever leave home? Don't leave home with the Father. Second lesson I think we learned from this story is that God is a God of free choice. The son wanted to leave. He asked for his money. Okay, you want to go? You can go. God is so committed to free choice. That's why he allowed Lucifer to go south. Adam and Eve, he gave free choice. That's why he doesn't destroy evil. It's all free choice. I was in India doing a youth conference with a man named John Fowler. He's retired now. Wonderful, wonderful man. We're very good friends. Going speaking out the same places where he was. 3,000 people at this conference, and he told a story I'll never forget. He said when he was young, in the same city there in Pune, India, he had a friend. He's John. His friend was Johnny. He said Johnny was always stealing. Just thought it was funny. Jumped over a fence, grabbed some fruit from a tree, and give it to his friends and just laugh. He was a thief. Just kids. He said after we graduated from that school, we went separate ways. He became a pastor, never knew where his friend went. 30, 40 years later, he's in a bus in the middle of India, standing, holding the railing. He happened to turn around, and here was Johnny. What are the odds? 1 billion people, and your childhood friend is in the bus. He said, "Johnny, it's me. I'm John. At the next stop, let's get off and we'll catch up." Looked off into space. After a few minutes, went back. "Johnny, it's me. It's John. I know it's you." They'll stop. Looked out the window. All of a sudden, the man behind him pulled the cord. The bus stopped. And on his way out the door, he took his wallet and handed it to John Fowler. And he said, "I think this is yours." And he jumped off the bus. He had picked his own friend's wallet. 30, 40 years. 2 boys growing up in the same school, the same church with the same name. One becomes a pastor, one becomes a thief. It's free choice. God will not control which direction you're going to go. Number 3, the parties will always end up with the pigs. The young man in the story, he had a good time out on what they call the far country. He's drinking and he's got friends and he's having a great time. But eventually he runs out, and it says he had to eat at a farmer's house and eat with the pigs. I could line up the people here who could say, Pastor Dan, if you ever need someone to give a testimony, I tried it out there. I lived a fast life. I tried everything. I had fun for a while. But it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. Have you found that? If you're thinking about that, maybe you've got kids or grandkids who need to think about this. The parties of the world will always come to an end. You will always end up with the pigs. And here is God's dilemma. God went to the tree there in the Garden of Eden, and he said, if you eat of the tree, you will surely die. Not because he is going to be the one to kill. He just said, if you leave me, I am the only source of life in the universe. You will surely die. Satan says, no, you will not surely die. Look at me. I am not with God, and I am very much alive. You do not need God. You don't need his church. You don't need his religion. You don't need his rules. You don't need any of it. Come with me. You'll be like gods. There's the fundamental debate in the universe. And for a long time, people think Satan's right. You live your life, and you can be rich, and you can have a party, and you can have a good time. And the Bible says it won't come to an end until after the 1,000 years are over, the millennium. And then it says the city of heaven will come down, and then all the wicked are going to rise, and they gather around the city. And until that minute, they think it's okay. Satan was right, and God was wrong. Because they're alive, and they do not need God, and they do not need religion, and they're doing okay. Until the final battle, then the Bible says there will be the final fire, and they will all die. Now, find out, sin will kill you. You will end up with the pigs. The world's parties will run out. God doesn't want anyone to wait until then to find out. It's too late after you die. How do you teach about the reality of death without having people die? And so Jesus tells a story. He can't take people to heaven for an hour and then take people to hell for an hour and say, now make your choice. That would be too coercive. But he tells a story. And he says, there was a boy who left the father's house. And he had fun for a while, but the party ran out. And then he says, don't ever leave the father's house. The story is the substitute for you dying yourself. He said, I don't want you to die yourself. Don't wait to the end of the 1,000 years to find out. Sin will kill you eventually. You will end up with the pigs. He tells a story. But the story is not enough. And Jesus comes down and he says, let me show you. And he walks around for 33 years, and then he goes into the garden and he takes every sin that has ever been committed by anybody, and he takes it into his own soul and feels as if he himself has committed all those sins. And what happens when he has sinned? He dies. He cannot find the Father anymore. And then he goes on to a cross and he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And he dies. And he hopes that everyone will look at the cross and say, oh, that's what happens with sin. Sin will kill you. And Jesus' cross is a substitute. He doesn't want you to have to find out yourself by dying. Learn from Jesus dying on a cross. Sin will kill you eventually. I've used a parable. A group of people were climbing over a hill going down to a lake, a bay. We're going to go swimming in the bay, and all of a sudden a stranger is up in our group, and he says, are you sure you want to go swimming there? There's sharks in that bay. There's sharks in the bay? Are you sure? Haven't you noticed that some people never come back? Well, we wondered where some people were. He said, there's sharks. They died. Please don't swim in the bay. There's sharks. They got to the beach, and we cried out. There was a man swimming out there, and he said, hey, are there sharks out there? No, there's no sharks out here. Is he still telling you that there are sharks out here? He's always trying to spoil everyone's good time. Come on out. Water's fine. Look at me. So a few people begin to change their clothes. The man doesn't know what else to do. He walks right into the water. And in about 3 seconds, there's the sharks, and they get him, and they drag him under. Pretty soon, there's parts all over the water, blood everywhere. We grab a hold of him and pull him out, but he dies. Now nobody swims in the bay. We know there's sharks in the bay. And they put up a little sign, please don't swim here. He died, so we would know there's sharks in the bay. Sharks will kill you. And Jesus dies on a cross as our substitute. And Jesus tells a story of a prodigal son, hoping we will learn from the story and from the cross as a substitute for you and me having to die ourselves. Then it's too late. Now we come to the heart of the story. The boy decides maybe he should go home. I'll tell my father, I have no right to be your son. Let me just be a servant in the back. I'll work for you. So he begins to go home. Bible says his father was watching and came running. No man in the Middle East would run, but he ran to his son. And he throws his arms around the son. The son begins to apologize. Dad, never mind. Stopped him. The son didn't have to say where the money was. He didn't have to pay him back. He didn't have to work in the fields. The father just takes him back. Calls for the servants. Bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the shoes. Let's have a party. My son is home. That's the gospel. When Jesus had one story to tell about what his father was like, this is the story he told, a 5-minute story. And he wants us to know this one thing. No matter what you've done, you can always go home again. That's what your father is. You can always go home. Doesn't matter what Saturday nights, what you've done, how many mistakes you've made, how long you've been away from God and the church. You can always go home again. The light is always on. The door is always open. The gate is up. You can always go home. I preached on this one Friday night at a college in India years ago. Different version of it, old version. Long line of people that talked to me Friday night afterward, probably hour and a half. Finally finished the line. There was one young man, handsome young man. Told me, he looked around to be sure no one would hear the story. He said, I made some mistakes. He said, I've had a girlfriend, and she broke up with me after 2 years. I thought we were going to get married. She broke up with me. I was lonely, I was hurt, I was rejected. Another girl kind of took advantage, and she took me, and we did something that I never planned to do till we were married. Now I'm scared I have a disease, and I thought maybe I can't be a pastor. My father's a pastor. I wanted to be a pastor. I thought it was hopeless, but then you say you can always go home again. Pastor, can I go home again? And I put my hands on his shoulders, and I said, my friend, you can always go home again. There is no more condemnation. God has already forgiven you. Now go and sin no more. He's a pastor of a good-sized church today. I'm proud of him. To use theological language, God is a constant. Many of us who grew up with the idea that God was a variable, and you had to do certain things, and there was a big question mark. Would God accept you or not? But here in this story, you don't have to worry about God. God is a constant. He will run to you. He will take you, and he will welcome you home. You can always go home again. There were 4 young men who were fighting in World War II. One of the young men died. They took him to the little Catholic church there, had a little cemetery with a white fence. They asked the priest, can we bury our friend in your cemetery? I said, well, was he Catholic? Well, no, don't think he was. Well, you'd have to bury him outside. And so they buried him outside the fence, went back to the war. They came back at the end of the war. They wanted to visit their friend's grave. They got there and they couldn't find it. They went inside to the priest again and they said, we can't find our friend. What did you do with him? They said, I felt terrible. I should never have said to you he had to be buried outside. So what did you do? Did you move him? No, I couldn't move him. So I moved the fence so he could go from outside to inside. And that's the gospel. If you want to be inside the fence, you can be in. Jesus has already done everything necessary and gives it to you as a gift. Well, one last quick point before we're done. How many young people that I preach to around the world have been afraid that if they gave their life to Jesus, the life would be over, the party would be over? And I said, no, the party will not be over. In this story, there's not just one party, there are two parties. There's one party in the far country, but there's also a party at the Father's house. One party is going to come to an end. One party is going to last forever. One party is with people who will run away. One party is with the Father. You will not have to go without a party. The choice is not between a party and nothing. The choice is between which party you want to go to. I don't know what your picture of God is today. I can just say to you, if your picture of God is He is a God who burns people in hell every day, He's better than that. If your picture of God is that He creates all the disasters in the world, and that's why you're poor, or you've got some suffering, God is better than that. It's not like that. If you think that's why you're sick, God is better than that. If you think God is too many rules, too many restrictions, no, God is better than that. He is better than your wildest dreams, better than your imagination. He's the best. I heard a story a while ago from the Civil War in our country. 1863, they called it Gettysburg, big Pennsylvania there. I've been to the place. North and South, brother fighting against brother. 50,000 people died or wounded in 3 days. There were piles of dead people around. Both armies went away. Right at dusk, the old man was a Quaker, came out with his little lantern looking for his son. He knew his son fought in the battle that day and thought, I'm going to find my son. And so he looked around for his son, and he would cry out, John Hartman, thy father is calling thee. He's a Quaker. Then he would listen to see if he could find his son. Some people got mad at him. Go away, old man. And other people said, wish it was my dad looking for me. Finally, he cried out one more time, John Hartman, John Hartman. And a voice came. Father, I'm over here. He ran over there. He pulled the dead bodies off. He grabbed his son and put him over his shoulder and took him home. That father didn't care which side his son fought on. He didn't care who won the battle. He just wanted his son home. HMS Richards used to go all over the world and say, your name may not be John Hartman tonight, but you have a heavenly Father who is going over the battlefield of his life, calling your name to call you home. God is a God who has a home. And whatever you've done, whoever you are, doesn't matter. He'll take you home. You can always go home again. So wherever you are today, whatever your picture of God is, I invite you to always go back to God. If you're already at the Father's house, then never leave the Father's house. This is God Talk. It's our second program. I'm Pastor Dan Smith. We hope that you'll come back. Watch us again. God Talk.